We come to 2.3 now. It talks about teaching learning process. 2.3.1, it is a student-centric method such as experiential, participative learning and problem-solving methods. This is the real crux of criteria 2.3 or criteria 2, which talks about what kind of methods are you using. NAAC has categorized a huge number of methods into three areas. Whether it is experiential, what kind of experiences do you offer to your students through academics? Number two, how do you participate the students into the teaching learning process? And number three, do you challenge them by problems? These three are the key areas, and under these a very large number of methodologies can set in. Now when we are talking about experiential learning methods, field work, research, on-job training, role plays, simulations, mock parliaments, some kind of practical learning, real-time working out. When we talk of nursing and such kind of courses, clinical experience. When we are talking about working for the community services that you are able to see. All these methods, they need to be integrated into the teaching methodologies to make the curriculum much more stronger, to see to it that the student gets a job or gets the advantage of this learning very quickly. And therefore, teaching learning method, especially with an experiential method, counts more. Experiential method has not only been counted out over here in 2.3.1, as you recollect it was also there in criteria 1. So experiential method has a higher weightage that you are able to see. Then we also look into a variety of other methods that are the participative methods. I wish to comment on one of the huge leaders in religion. It was Gautama the Buddha. Buddha was the intelligent person. He was Buddha the Gautama. As I go through his materials, reading, as I go through the content, what I find is Buddha's success lied in making the interactions very participative. If you look into that statement called as Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami, what does it make a mention? A lady asked him as to, well, when I have problem, what do I do? He replied, you approach a Buddha. She said, you are such a person, you will not stay here for a day or two. How can I approach you? So she said, then form a Sangha, form a group, interact and find out the solutions. We are actually talking about participative learning. So participation makes the students interact amongst themselves and they come out with extremely useful solutions and suggestions, making learning process a wonderful one. Then you are able to see there are a variety of participative learning methods. It could be some kind of exhibitions, it could be some kind of seminar presentations. In our department we conduct sketching labeling skills in zoology, a kind of a workshop where the student actually completes the scientific figure in 3 to 4 minutes at the end of 3 hours. Here they are made to participate. So it's again a participative methodology. A variety of student seminars after the teacher has taught the content is also a kind of a participative methodology. Participation leads to innovations. So a variety of innovative teaching methodologies set in. A variety of creative approaches come in. Varied methodologies should be tried out. Audio-visual tools can be tried out. You will find something very surprising, that a student may not understand in the traditional way, but he may understand it with an audio book, or he may understand it with a video. So it could also be a variety of ways to be tried. Rather than standardizing everything and trying to fit everyone into one picture, it would be better if we are able to understand our students. Very often I keep on getting a question which will later on be coming in, and it is related to outcome based education, where who should write down the outcomes, and the first answer of the teacher is outcomes should be written by the university because university has created the syllabus. Outcomes are to be written by the teacher because the teacher knows the student. The student in my college is different from the student in your organization, and therefore outcomes need to be written by the teachers. Now when we are talking about something called as a variety of teaching methodologies, real life learning, surveys, analysis, internship, brainstorms, role plays, storyboards, welcoming new ideas, stimulating the environments, making them work in the teams, all these creating clubs, making them work. This is stimulating the academic environment to see to it that learning becomes a habit, not just a process. Now when we talk of the next part, that is 2.3.2, we come to technology used in learning. So when we are talking about technology assisted learning, it could be LMS, learning management systems, which can be created by the organizations. Or it could be use of technological tools such as Google Classrooms, internet supported learning, or Wikipedia. When you use it, it's an open-ended resource, OER, blogs, and a variety of ways by which you are interacting with the students. A learning process is not a time-bound process. A learning process is not limited to a particular time frame. It is not that the student, it is a 5-hour learning process. It's a continuous process, and therefore the teacher needs to see to it that the student is associated for the process of learning continuously. Now we come to the next aspect in 2.3, and that happens to be the ratio of mentor to students for academic and other related issues. Here we are talking about mentoring. The relationship of the student to teacher is now going to be a mentor to mentee relationship. Here what is expected is that number of students to number of full-time teachers. There you are able to see the ratio of mentor to mentee is going to play an important role. Also faculty wise, how this ratio works out. What mechanisms are the organizations doing to see to it that the ratio is good and the process is very, very effective. Whether some kind of mentor-mentee charts are being made, whether the meeting is continuous, whether they are associated with each other, whether there happens to be some kind of communication, whether the mentee is talking to the mentor to get his problem sorted out. What are the different methodologies that the organization is using to see to it that the process of mentoring is becoming wonderful? I wish to add one thing over here which we rarely talk or we don't talk. The mentoring process for the first year will be different than the mentoring process for the second year. In the first year, the student is being mentored so that He comes into the organization, he is a part of the organization, he understands the organization and he understands his role in the organization with regards to teaching learning processes. In the second year, his role it differs. He is made to look towards his career. And in the final year, he is actually made to work in such a way so that tomorrow he becomes a successful individual in the market. Now, in every of these aspects, you are able to see a different mentoring role plays, and the role of the mentor changes from the level of student to student, which we don't count in the current case. But it needs to be thought in this way. If we wish our organizations to produce students who are effective in the markets. After which we come to the next key indicator, that is teacher profile and quality. This carries 60 marks. We come to 2.4.1. Teacher profile and teacher quality. This talks about average percentage of full-time teachers against the sanctioned post during last 5 years. That would mean that how many full-time posts are available and how many teachers have been sanctioned out and they have been appointed over there. This is a quantitative metric. The best ratio would be more than 85%. It also depends on the vacancies available, it depends on the full-time post sanctioned, it depends on the full-time post filled up. The full-time post can be filled up by the management, by the government, by the appointing agency. We come to the next question, and that happens to be 2.4.2. It talks about the full-time teachers with PhD and higher degrees such as DSc, DLIT, DNB super speciality, etc. etc. Here the highest degree is to be counted out. Until recently it was PhD. Now it is beyond PhD. How many such kind of teachers are available in the organization? They add to the glamour and to the intelligence of the organization. We come to 2.4.3. It talks about average teaching experience of full-time teachers in the same institution. That would mean that how many teachers are teaching in that organization and for how many years. This is perhaps indicating something related to a flux. What is the flux of the teachers who are coming in and going out? And how many teachers remain in the organization? It means that if the teacher is going to last in that organization for a longer period of time, it is going to benefit the student. It would add to the experience of the teacher and to the comfort of the teacher for working in that organization. If the number of teachers coming in and going out is very large, it reduces the maturity of the organization, though the organization may be very, very old. And therefore, that ratio comes out over here. We come to a very important aspect called as 2.5 now, evaluation process. Evaluation process and reforms. It carries 30 points. Something very important over here on which I am going to highlight. The metric happens to be the mechanism of internal assessment is transparent and robust in terms of frequency and mode. What does that mean? It means so that how is the internal examination being conducted? When we say about an external examination, our first answer is exams are conducted by the university, and therefore NAAC says that let us not talk of those examinations. Let us talk of those examinations which you conduct. If you are teaching using variety of methods, you will be assessing the student with the help of a variety of methods. And therefore you are able to see what are the different types of range of methods of taking examinations that you have for internal assessment is being asked over here. Whether you conduct tests, whether you conduct surprise tests, whether you give open book tests, whether you give some kind of projects, whether you give some kind of seminars, whether you give some kind of interactions, whether you give some kind of interviews to the students to be conducted. What are the different ways by which you are asking the students to learn? And how well are they learning is what is asked over here. Secondly, the way you are asking, are you jotting it down on the paper? That is the system transparent? Is the system beneficial to the student? Is it robust? Multiple types of examinations. If a student says, I am sick, I cannot come for the examination for the next 1 month, but I am on the bed, I can answer your questions. Can you take an examination using a Zoom meeting or on the phone? It is still an examination that you are able to see. That adds to the robustness of the organization. How many times do you take the examination is the frequency, and how you take it is the mode of the examination. This is a very important question, and it should be written down in 500 words. The peer team visit looks after it. The second question in this particular lot happens to be the mechanism to deal with internal examination is related grievances is transparent, time bound and efficient. 2.5.2. It talks about, is there a system by which grievances are counted? Is there a mechanism whereby you are able to take a decision very quickly? Is there a mechanism whereby you are able to communicate the decision very fast? Does the action taken is known to everyone? For example, a junior supervisor does not come for the supervision purpose for some reason. Do you communicate him immediately to say that this is your first time, next time you will not be late, your supervision has been shifted to so and so date? If he has done it for the second time, do you see to it that he is intimated by a letter and he is asked for a question? If it happens again with him, what is the mechanism that you are going to do? Are these mechanisms written down on the paper? Are they okayed by the examination cell and the examination committee? Have they been accepted by the IQAC? And are they available to everybody? Here you are able to see the grievances. These grievances could be from the teachers, from the supervisors, from the senior supervisors, from the students, from the non-teaching faculty, because examination is a huge process, and therefore having a systematic methodology really counts. This is what is to be put up into 500 words for 15 marks. We go to the next question, that is 2.6. It is student performance and learning outcomes. Some time ago I made a mention of learning outcomes. The teachers and the 2.6.1 makes a mention saying that teachers and students are aware of the stated program and course outcomes of the programs offered by the institution, carries 15 marks. You are able to see over here, does the teacher know and the student know that an outcome is there? Whatever you are teaching in the classroom, does the student know that what you are going to teach before he starts learning? Second part, does he know that after the course is over, the student is going to have domain knowledge of this subject in such and such way? Does the student know how it is going to benefit him when the course ends? But he needs to know it before he goes for the course. I always give one example. When you go to learn car driving, you know at the end of this driving course, you are going to have a license in your hand. No one ever has in his or her mind that at the end of the entire course, I am going to bang my vehicle on someone. That is not what is expected. So here you are able to see, we know what the outcome is. In the same way, what we teach, whether the student knows the outcome is a big part. and therefore outcomes are to be written down by the teachers, not by the university, because we know our students better than what our university knows our students. These outcomes are to be put up on the website. They are to be intimated. They should be seen to everybody. Some time ago in the first session criteria, when I had made a mention what is a program, what is a course. So program happens to be BA, BCA, BCS is a program, MSCs are programs, MA are programs. Courses are what we teach, and outcomes are what the student should know at the end of the course, or what he is going to get at the end of the course. Then you are able to say, how do you make an attainment of what you have taught? We often talk about our results in percentages. We make a mention, my result is 89%. Almost all students passed. Percentages are to the students. Attainment is to the teacher. There are mechanisms by which the teacher can find his attainment. When attainment is being found out, it would mean that how much the teacher has taught, and from what has been taught, how much the student has understood. It is not in terms of percentage, it is in terms of attainment. Thus, the simplest way of conducting an attainment would be, if I have 100 students in my classroom for the course that I teach, I will be counting out the marks of all those 100 students. I will be adding the marks of all those 100 students, and then I will be dividing it by the number called 100. That is the number of students who have appeared for the examination. The number that I get is an attainment score. It is not the average passing percentage. It is the attainment score that you have got. In this particular attainment score, if it is lesser than 40 or if it is around 40, it means that the teacher needs to improve. If the attainment score goes beyond 60, 65, 70, then in that case it's a good attainment score. While taking out the attainments, you should also see to it that what is your attainment score for internals and what is your attainment score for externals. Because while doing so, we come to know whether we are biased to our students, that the internal scores have been very high and the external scores have been very poor, because external assessments have been done by the university. So then in that case, it will be useful for us to come in line with the university to see to it that we are not fooling our students. Here you are able to see attainment really counts out. Then you are able to see this attainment needs to be measured using program outcomes, program specific outcomes and course outcomes. When we are talking about the final year of the students, when we talk about the result, now we come to the next aspect, that is called the results. And so you are able to see what is the percentage of students who have passed in the final year. Keep in mind, when NAAC is asking you what is the enrollment ratio in 2.1, it does not talk about dropouts. But in 2.6, they are talking about what is the passing percentage, where they make a mention how many students have passed out in the final year. You will say 400 students have passed out in the final year, and then they will check up the enrollment score. The enrollment was 1300 students. The passing number of students are 400 or 500 or 700. That would mean that, say 1200 had taken admission and 500 have passed. It would mean that 700 are not passing out currently. It would mean that the ratio is very poor. That is the dropout. That dropout becomes very big. If the dropout is more than 40%, it would mean that we are not fit to live in that particular business. And therefore, we need to be very careful to see to it that our students really work hard and get wonderful scores. We come to the last aspect, that is called as 2.7, which happens to be student satisfaction survey. I had made a mention of it that this is yet another method by which NAAC assesses the organization. Here, student satisfaction survey is a mandatory kind of a question. There is no option to it. In this particular question, a key of 21 questions is given. 20 are objective, 1 is subjective. This key is sent to the students, for which the college has to provide the data of name, class, gender, student ID number, Aadhaar ID number, mobile number, email ID, to which degree program he is. All this database in an Excel sheet is mailed to NAAC, and once that has been mailed out to the NAAC, then after we have submitted the SSR, immediately SSS begins. In this SSS, that is student satisfaction survey, the questions are sent to at least 10% of the students. They are not told which 10% students are going to get this particular key. It is expected that the students fill up those questions without the influence of the organization and they send it. These 60 marks really count out a lot because they are taken it with great seriousness as to what is the student suggesting about the organization. This completes criteria 2.1 to 2.7. Teaching, learning and evaluation, which has 350 marks, is undoubtedly the biggest and the heaviest criteria. An organization can improve to any level, and IQSC really plays a very, very big role in setting up the quality standards for the organization. Thank you.